So welcome everyone to our LinkedIn Live discussion today. For all those of you who aren't aware, the Race and STEM Network is there to unite and be a vessel for specifically people of color on the global scale within the science, tech, engineering, and math space. I had the pleasure of meeting our next guest roughly about 6 to 8 weeks ago, I believe. At another event, and by title, it was really impressive to hear, and by the little that we spoke about, I should say, in terms of you as an individual, I found really interesting, and I'm glad that we've been able to get to the stage now where we can have a discussion on a live platform to share little bits of information, positivity, and your impacts in regards to the STEM industry. So welcome to you, James, and thank you for speaking to me today. From an intro perspective, fantastic. From an intro perspective, tell us about you, your background, where you're from, your upbringing. Tell us a story.
Yeah, so I was born in Zimbabwe. So I was born in one of the kind of mid-sized towns of Zimbabwe called Mutare. I grew up a family of 3 other siblings, so 4 of us in total. Very kind of normal upbringing, I guess, to some extent. Very, I guess, to some extent, African middle class, I guess some people would say. So when, had very liberal parents. They were, from their generation, they were kind of the first people to kind of have proper jobs, like my grandparents, from the previous generation where Zimbabwe was still called Rhodesia, so pre-independence. So it was a very different situation for people of color, back then in many places in Africa. But yeah, so my upbringing was, I guess, kind of the fruits of their labor, I guess. So I was very fortunate in that sense. And then when I was about 11, I moved with my whole family over to the UK. The political situation in Zimbabwe was not very stable, and my parents made the decision to move to the UK. So yeah, that was quite interesting. So lived in a few places, mainly kind of ended up settling in the Midlands. So that's kind of where I spent a lot of my schooling. I then went to university, also in the Midlands, did my studies also in the Midlands. Yeah, I guess that's a little bit about where I came from and my upbringing.
Brilliant, thank you. Midlands, I'm familiar with the Midlands myself, having grown up there. Very lovely, lots of greenery. And yes. From leading on from that, then let's talk about your profession from an educational perspective to where you are now. Would you mind shedding some light on that for us?
Yeah, so I've always been a bit confusing to people and my teachers because I've never really been a typical student in the sense of, you are going to do this. So I've always been very studious. I was, what I guess most people will kind of call a geek or whatever, kind of enjoyed my studies, always studying, to the extent that my parents would sometimes be like, okay, you need to stop studying, go have some fun. Like I was the child whose parents would be like, go have fun. And then they'll be like, I will even drop you off and pick you up. But anyway, but I've also really liked creative sides of things. So I guess I've always been very kind of studious and into the sciences and stuff like that, but also really liked creative things as well. But I guess as much we in our education system, you do have to make some decisions as what you're going to do, because you start off with a broad range, and as you do your A levels and stuff, you start to kind of veer down a certain route. for different reasons, I kind of ended up going towards the sciences, partly because initially, through the pressure of, well, not pressure, but through the encouragement of my parents, they were like, oh, you know, maybe being a doctor. And I considered that. I picked the sort of subjects to do that. But I'm a bit of a clean freak, and the idea of blood and stuff like that just didn't really seem appealing. So I decided that I would just go into the sciences and help people that way. And chemistry was something that I loved as a subject because for me, chemistry is the most interesting science, just because I feel like it's interrelated with everything, but it is probably a bit more applicable and tangible to people in comparison to something like physics. And it's not fully as complicated as how biology can be sometimes. So I feel like it's that nice science that people can really relate to. So kind of, say that again. Oh.
The happy medium.
Yes, the happy medium. So yes, I went down that route, and I majored in medicinal chemistry. And through that, I did a research project that was looking at making a compound that would basically help to reduce the impacts of stroke patients. And so, you know, that was like a year-long project that I really, really enjoyed. And I thought, oh, okay, I think this might be something that I would enjoy doing. And I also did a more biological module that looked at using stem cells to treat spinal cord injuries. So I was like, okay, these are very interesting things, but I wasn't quite sure if that's what I wanted to do, because I also did international business as part of my degree. And I was toying between the two. And I thought, you know what I'll do? I'm just going to go away, travel for a year, and then come back and figure all this stuff out. And through that time period, I realized that actually I wanted to do a PhD to further my understanding and to further my kind of scientific curiosity, I guess. And that's what led to me doing a PhD in regenerative medicine. And I chose that because I thought regenerative medicine or cell and gene therapy, or, you know, that kind of realm of things was going to become the new frontier of medicine. And I wanted to be a part of that.
Excellent. That's really nice to hear. And I'm sure that a number of fellow colleagues across the STEM sector in general who are of African parents have all had conversations about, you know, the direction in which your career and education should go according to how our parents feel, how your parents felt, and their parents, and so forth. With that being the case, you know, deciding to go against the grain, if you will, and embark upon this world of science, which you clearly find really fascinating through chemistry specifically. As a person of color, what does today's world of STEM look like through your eyes then?
I think through my eyes, it's really exciting. And I think there's a lot of very different possibilities. I think, you know, when you look at all the different realms of STEM, and, you know, I started off in chemistry, but now in my role at the company I'm at, we work on manufacturing and process development technologies for the cell and gene therapy space. So that's a mix of pretty much all of the STEM parts of things. So that's the science parts of the biology, but the technology part. So we've got a lot of engineering as well that goes on. And, you know, maths is in everything. So, you know, we really kind of embrace it all. And I think we live in a world where STEM is so multidisciplinary that I think it's so exciting, because you can tackle these STEM projects and these STEM challenges from different angles using whatever you've studied, whether that's chemistry or physics or biology or all the other interdisciplinaries that are within that. So I think it's really exciting and it's full of possibilities, and I think it's there to make the world a better place. But I think looking at it from the lens of a person of color, and for other people, you know, from other kind of minorities of different sorts, it's not the most equal or accessible area. I think, you know, I'm often one of the only or few people of color at a conference or workshop or whatever. I mean, even my undergrad, I think I was the only Black person within my undergrad. There were a couple of other people from different ethnicities, but it was majority Caucasian. So I think STEM is very exciting, but I don't think it is accessible to all. And what those reasons are, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I think that is definitely something that stands out to me. It seems to still be this area that is not being afforded to everyone.
Mm. A little bit. I mean, what would you say in regards to that could be some areas of how STEM subjects could be seen to people to have access to develop themselves even further, you know, from an educational perspective? You know, how can young students who are of color identify with STEM to want to develop that as a career, do you think?
I think what is necessary is having good representation and seeing people who do those things. So, you know, let's say, take my nieces and nephews, they
Yeah.
see me like, oh, my uncle does this. You know, more people need people that are close to them, that aren't too detached, that they can resonate with and be like, oh, okay, so Uncle James, you do this. Then they can come to me and ask, oh, okay, what exactly does that mean? You know, I might speak to them and be like, oh, I definitely don't want to do that. But at least they have someone to have that conversation with in a very non-committal, and just you learn about something, right? It's, you know, it's even just the simple opportunity of, if there's a thing at work, at school, where it's like, okay, go speak to someone who's in a career, or go to do a visit at a family member's workplace. If people of color don't have people within the STEM, they're never really going to be exposed to that. And if they're never exposed to that, then you just don't think of certain things as a career if you've never thought about it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's that accessibility and knowing that something exists. Obviously, I know people know that STEM exists, but it's like, there's so many different career options and things that you can do. You know, it's not just biology, it's not just chemistry, it's not just physics. There's, you know, in all of it, there's so many different disciplines that, you know, really excite people in different ways and all come together to do very exciting things. And I think part of what's necessary is just giving people exposure to that and having conversation, making it accessible. So simply being able to talk about STEM around your table with your friends is an important thing. And that comes from exposure and the sort of familiarizing it just being another thing that people can speak about and interact with.
I agree. You know, there's something to be said for a lot of the education system and what, especially when you're maybe the years of 13 to 16, 17, in terms of, you know, what I personally experienced anyway. I didn't know that if we're talking life sciences specifically, someone like yourself in that profession, you know, when I was in my science lessons, I was taught what the equation for photosynthesis was, you know, as opposed to actually knowing that if you study and become a biologics SME or chemistry SME, whatever that looks like, what the jobs would entail and what you'd be doing within those jobs, you know, whether it's in the lab, whether it's on a manufacturing site and all these things. And yeah, I think you're right, you know, to have people who are on a day-to-day exploring, showcasing, introducing all of these day-to-day job and responsibilities and how fun it can be, you know, that will really make a massive difference. You're from the life sciences sector specifically.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, James, you know, how does a lack of representation alter outcomes within the STEM space?
Mm-hmm. It breeds inequality in many ways. I see that being one of the key things that lack of representation does within STEM and other, areas. So two examples would be jobs and careers. When you don't have that representation, as we've just discussed, people don't go into certain jobs and certain careers because they just don't know how to get into them, or the fact that they exist, or how to access them, right?
Yeah.
Are these being put in the right sort of job boards that everyone has access to, or are they in fairly exclusive posts? Do you know what I mean? Like it's that thing of, are people actually getting an opportunity to interact with them? And if there's no representation by people who can help to disseminate these careers and how exciting they are and what's available, then you further perpetuate this lack of representation by not having more people being able to interact with it and engage with it. The second thing I would say is with knowledge and information, specifically misinformation can be one of the things that comes out as a lack of representation within the STEM. And a key example would be what happened during COVID. So there actually ended up having to be a lot of task forces and kind of workshops specifically for the BAME communities to really debunk theories and go against the misinformation that was going on around that time. So there were a lot of statistics that showed that there was a lower uptake of the vaccinations in the BAME communities because people didn't really, there was a lot of misinformation and a lot of propaganda and a lot of conspiracy theories kind of going around. And actually a lot of it was very much like, you go onto the NHS website or you go into, very credible sources and you can get really good information. But again, because people don't feel like the STEM on the sciences or life sciences in this specific example is something they can interact with, because actually it's not something they've been exposed to. They don't know how to get that information to digest it from themselves to be like, oh, actually, wait, this is safe. This actually is a technology that's been tested for a really long time. Actually, this is a different application for it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's those ways that it actually ends up manifesting in very negative ways. Whereas, you look at other people who do have a greater access and appreciation of STEM, they're less likely to look at things. I'm not saying they don't question things, but they're more likely to be more critical in an informed way, rather than just not, taking things blindly and just kind of being like, oh, it's bad, So I think jobs and careers and also just knowledge and information can be very harmful ways in which lack of representation in STEM can impact.
Well, I don't disagree with what you said at all. However, to the voices out there or to the people who are listening, who, there's pros and cons to everything, right? People have an opinion, which is fine. That's what makes the world an interesting place and discussions so poignant. And there'll be those who are a bit skeptical, going back to, for example, the COVID example, of all of the education, I think, in the sense of go to the NHS website, have a look, speak to this person, these doctors, etc., etc., etc. But then you'll get the individual who's a little bit more potentially educated and say, well, look, the clinical trials are only on this type of individual, as opposed to being very diverse, and what have you, which is why there'll be hesitation, which is why there'll be, frustrations in regards to specific subjects per se. With that as an example, you're obviously educated, you understand the science of things. To those who are up and coming, do STEM fields have a role in shaping our understanding of race and ethnicity, do you think?
Yes. I think, like many other aspects of the world we're in, STEM plays a crucial role in our understanding. Giving the example, taken from what you've just said, when we look at the education piece of things is really important, right?
Yes.
it's important for many reasons, because you want to remove biases, you want to remove stigmas, and you want to remove the stereotyping that happens when things aren't based on fact. Going even to the example that you gave of the kind of clinical trials, it's really important that trials are representative of the people that they're eventually going to help to treat. And I think it's a two-way thing of people from different backgrounds also have to be able to interact with things so that you can be part of it. So it's really hard for people to, with clinical trials, people have to sign up. So we have to be willing to sign up, right? You can't just, if the data isn't there, it's because not all the time, but are the people willing to do things? Yes. Things like, for instance, bone marrow donation. There's such a big call for the BAME community to get onto like the anti-Nolan donor register, because there's so little people who have volunteered to go on there, which means when people do need the transplantations, there's a much smaller pool of people to choose from. So it's things like that where I think it can be a very symbiotic relationship where we teach each other, but also STEM helps to improve our understanding of what's going on and of race and of ethnicity. And I think there's loads of things that we can do with that. I was at an event last week where an interesting thing about, getting people from getting people to understand different perspectives. So it was a workshop on building inclusive cultures within the workplace, specifically in engineering, and things like privilege workshops and reverse monitoring were really interesting concepts, because it creates a very nice open space for people to have a dialogue, to be like, this is what I experienced and this is my perception, and you're airing it out, and when you do it in that way, people can be like, oh, I never thought of it that way, I never saw things in this way. And I think for me, communication is one of the key things in any realm of life, and when you do that, you get that better understanding. And I think it's something that communication and learning is always going to be a two-way thing, and I think it's important to have those sort of things in place.
No, I agree. You're someone who, in the short time we've known each other, has always shown positivity. The glass is definitely half full as opposed to half empty. If something's not right, you find a way to get around it in a positive way to beat all the negativity that comes in your direction. So we're thinking empowerment now. And your job title is what, for those? I don't think we covered that actually. What is your job title currently?
So I'm currently the Vice President of Bioprocessing and Applications.
There we go. So a very senior position. And obviously you've gone through a number of roles and jobs to get to where you are, education as well, networking, etc., etc. So what's your philosophy, James, when overcoming adversity, particularly within, the life sciences, STEM?
So interestingly enough, I draw from non-STEM sources for my kind of philosophy. So I am very much aligned. I'm not a Buddhist, but I'm very much aligned with that sort of thinking, kind of Eastern philosophy. And there's kind of three main kind of philosophies that I prescribe by when it comes to adversity in anything, and definitely when it comes to STEM. The first one is the concept of Kaizen, which is a Japanese concept of continuous improvement. The second one is a phrase / mantra I always say, which is a reason, a season, and a lifetime. So I always think that everything, people, etc., happen either for a reason, a season, or for a lifetime. So you have to understand where the adversity is sitting, and when you understand that, that actually allows you to be able to move through it with more grace and empowerment. And then the third thing is a concept of Mahayana Buddhism, which looks at essentially what's called the small path, which is focusing on yourself. Once you focus on yourself, you can aim to go to what's called the bodhisattva, which is, a person who tries to help and benefit the greater good with no expectation of reward. So kind of like that pure karmic, like I'm doing this for the sake of doing it without expecting anything. So those are the kind of three philosophies I prescribe by. So, and just to clarify, yes, I am a scientist. But what all of these do is they help me to build resilience and mettle to move through anything that happens in my professional or personal life. So I think, especially in STEM, these sort of concepts of continuous improvement, of understanding that something happens, but it is not always going to stay that way, are really important. And also that idea of focusing on what you need to do and then focusing on the bigger picture are very important. So relating that to STEM subjects are exploratory, right? Especially when you're working on the research things and, particularly like in the job that I'm in now, nothing works the first time. Sometimes it doesn't work the 50th time, and sometimes it doesn't work the 100th time. When you're working in that sort of industry where you're trying to break barriers and push boundaries and explore more things, you need that perseverance to be able to wake up each day and sometimes repeat the same thing with the smallest of details change to finally get to where you want to go to. And also sometimes also understanding that you can do that even for the 10,000th time. And despite your greatest efforts, it still won't work. There's many research projects and organizations and institutes that have been formed where just either we're not there yet advancement-wise in terms of technology and science to be able to get the results that we wanted. But actually, in spite of all of that, as long as you take the lessons from that experience, you've won. And that's the key thing. So the adversity is there to teach you, and it's really important that you take those lessons. So having a mindset of no matter what happens, I am winning. Whenever I get a negative result or the result that I don't want, that's okay. What have I learned from it? And when you have that mindset of always winning through learning, it really just helps you to push through any sort of adversity you have. And that will happen even in your career. When you don't get that job that you want, what happened? What can I learn from it? What can I do to improve my situation better? Okay, they said I didn't have the skills. How can I get the skills? Can I go and shadow someone? Is this, it's those sort of things that take the best out of it. Like you said, I'm a glass half full sort of person. So take the lessons, take the blessings, take the key things that you need and move on and reiterate.
I'm thinking about my 4.5 and 2.5-year-old daughters. I don't know if they would like those lessons to be installed when it comes to, the reasons why you can't play with that toy or have that sweet at this time of night or whatever. But I really do agree with that principle and that theory, the philosophy, sorry. I think it's something which is, you're right, it doesn't just come across STEM, it's external, it's life. Actually, isn't it? And it's such a common topic at the moment. I'm hearing about looking into yourself and identifying how you see yourself and how you can progress moving forwards, whether that's with somebody who can be a mentor, a sponsor, and all those types of things, or outlets or relationships to help you strive. It's not easy when starting off. I'm sure you can appreciate, or maybe you can't appreciate because it's just how you were born in your DNA. But it's not always easy to accept a failure or a negative as a lesson. It's hard to see in that moment, isn't it? Yes. Especially when if you're thinking about yourself in the lab, you can think, well, maybe I might be working for months on something here and the results will be very negative. However, the learning process, whether it be the fact of you're spending all these hours in the lab, it's part of the job. Whether it's the case of, you got 3/4 of the way, but then that last quarter of the way something went wrong, so we can build from here onwards and start to piece things together. I really love that approach. And even though as scientists you're taking a holistic faith, you know, in terms of its principles, I really like that. You're a mentor, you're an uncle, you're a friend, you're an ambassador, you're an ally. How do you implement this philosophy into your work as a life coach or mentor?
You know, one of the key things that I find to be integral to everything that you've just mentioned is a concept by he's actually German, Eckhart Tolle, who is a philosopher and writer of many things spiritual and whatnot, who's really interesting. And he has this book called The Power of Now. And there's there's this concept of accepting the isness of life. And that just means accepting the reality that you are in. And when you do that, you are more empowered to move and work in a more informed and responsive, positive way, rather than reactive resistance. So I find when you start with really understanding the situation that you're in, accepting it, and acceptance doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you're not going to do anything about it, but you say, okay, this is my situation, right? This is it, right? In summary, I guess what that means for me is you always start with self-awareness. When you have that self-awareness, that leads to that self-management. With self-management, you can go on to do social impact through social awareness and then social management. And I think those are kind of the key things I always say to people. It's like you say, you know, there's a lot of this introspective work that needs to be done. And it's so, so important because it's important for you to know yourself and understand what you stand for and what you're good at. Then also understand what you enjoy and then understand how you can harness those things to have a positive and beneficial impact on your own journey and therefore on other people.
Yeah. Speaking about these mentees that you have, I mean, you've been doing great work like this for how many years roughly?
So really, that's a good question. For a long time, so I actually started being a mentee in my second year of my in my second year of my undergrad. So I would start mentoring younger students coming into university. So that's something I've kind of maintained throughout my career, and then did it with some people during my PhD. And now I do it in a more formalized sense. Actually, it was quite formalized back then as well, but now I do it through specific programs. So there's one that's being done by Loughborough University called The Future Talent. And essentially that's looking at people from the BAME background or different ethnic minorities and linking them with a person who's in industry or something that has, you know, gone through different things within their career and helping them to understand the key things that they want to do. I'm also part of the Royal Academy of Engineering, and through that, there's this program that they run with the Windsor Fellowship called the Graduate Engineering Engagement Program, which again focuses on working with undergraduates and helping them to link with people who are mentors in industry, again, to see how they can get into industry, what are the key things they need to do, etc. So it's something that I've been doing. Oh God, I feel old now thinking about it, but I guess like
give us an approximation.
Almost 10 years. It's when I can say stuff is like a day long now.
Okay, so roughly 10 years. You're in touch with, you know, a younger generation on a day-to-day. You hear what they have to say, the good and the bad and the ugly. You're on the other side of it, representing a professional in STEM. From your eyes then, James, your perception, how are people of color currently represented in STEM to the younger generation?
It's a very good
question. It's a bit of a broad question.
And to be honest, I don't really know how to answer that, but I don't necessarily think that people of color are represented in STEM. So, and perhaps I'm ignorant because I don't follow much on popular culture. I am, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a nerd. I'm constantly like reading. I watch very little things. But I think, you know, when I look at it, there aren't any like super famous STEM icons that I can think of, at least Black people that I can think of, in the same way that I can think of singers and actors and sportsmen and sports. That, you know, no one is at the forefront for me, at least. But, you know, maybe, again, I'm not in every industry, so maybe there are people in different industries. But, you know, slowly you are hearing of people. So there was the professor who, at age 37, was it 30? I can't remember, but a certain age, a few weeks ago, he was the youngest Black professor at Cambridge. And, you know, it's stuff like that we need to be able to see more and more of, and getting that on the news. Don't get me wrong, I think sports is important, etc. But, you know, people who are doing things to save people's lives, people who are doing things to impact our climate in a positive way, people who are doing things to, you know, save the environment, all of those, that needs to be celebrated. That needs to be on the newspapers. That needs to be on the news, right? And I think it's, again, important to be seeing people and showing them that what we do is pretty cool. Like a lot of like what we've achieved in the last 100 years is due to STEM. And I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned the first ever Black lecturer at the university who was introduced to the UK, at least anyway. And, you know, just looking at him and what he represented is fantastic, you know, for people to see, you know, and also, again, from people who are outside of STEM. You know, I know, for example, the likes of Stormzy, you know, global rapper. He has something associated, I believe, with Oxford University or Cambridge. I can't remember which one. I think maybe Cambridge, to support, you know, people of color within certain areas of STEM. And that's coming from, you know, somebody who's very well, obviously globally known on a musical, from the music genre anyway. So I like that a lot. You know, I think there's modern day superheroes, if you will, that can really make an impact and really make a difference. And, you know, I think the hope is that they're spoken about in the schools. They're spoken about in the sixth form lessons. You know, it's obviously the relevant subjects in which, you know, they're teaching and they're being professionals within. In closing then, because I'm aware of the fact that we've been talking for a while, and to be honest with you, there's so much we could still uncover and discuss, James, and I'll be very keen to do another one of these with you if you're open to it. But how do you empower men and women within STEM and stay positive in what clearly can be a very uphill battle? You know, you told me at the beginning of the conversation you were the only person of color in some of your university lectures. You know, on a day-to-day basis in life sciences industry, especially within the ATMP industry, you're often the only person of color. How can you encourage others to stay positive?
I go back to one of those philosophies, specifically the Kaizen, which is the continuous improvement. So with that, I think there's three main things that I say to myself and therefore say to other people, because I think empowerment is so important for me. It's a key value of mine. And the first thing is, start off by understanding yourself and your values, what you believe in and what your goals are, and then keep working on it and be persistent and focused and have that tenacity to ignore the naysayers, but most importantly, have the discipline, because the discipline is a thing that will help you to go through that uphill battle, but know that there is a top of the hill, right? Because you know that there's an endpoint, there is that light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's really important. And Yeah, so really focus. And then the other thing is find yourself a mentor, find someone who is going to be there to challenge you and make you think and question things in a different way. And sometimes that will bring a lot of discomfort, and that's really good because that will allow you to say, no, this is really what I stand for. And that's beautiful. But also it will sometimes be like, actually, you know what? I do need to think of things differently because I was actually having some limiting beliefs or a very myopic way of looking at things, and having that critical friend, that mentor, that sponsorship is so important. And the third thing linking to that actually is sponsorship and allies, and having those people who are with you along the journey, because you can't do it alone. No one can do it alone. We are social beings. We live in a community, and it's important to find those people within that community who can help you along that journey and want to share and see the same kind of positivity and things flourish in the same way that you want. And again, that helps you in that uphill battle, because when you're by yourself, it feels harder than it is. They say a problem shared is a problem halved, right? So, and I think that's part of it. And really, those things I think have helped me. So really understanding myself, what I want to achieve, giving me that laser focus, and then having people who I can draw knowledge from. People have made mistakes before me. Let me learn from theirs so I don't repeat the same mistakes, but I make my own. And then I can teach other people about my mistakes, and then have that community to build you up and help you along that hill.
That's really lovely. And I think as well, even when you're at the top of whatever hill you want to be, to surround yourself with peers, mentors, friends who can keep you there. Because so often you can say, I've reached my goal of being a manager, I've reached my goal of being a director, and then there could be a steady decline. Whereas to how you can have people keep you there and uplift you, which is so important. That's great. Thank you. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure, number one, getting to know you, as I said, throughout the course of the year so far. I look forward to hearing of your continued success, because I know this isn't the top of the hill for you. I know there's more to come. And just for those who are listening again, would you mind just reminding us of the groups that you're associated to for mentorship? Because I think that could be something quite powerful for others who are like yourself, who can maybe say, well, look, I'd like to also do what James is doing and, offer my services. What were the names of the organizations again?
So there's the Graduate Engineering Engagement Program, or GEEP program, and that's run by the Royal Academy of Engineering, and also it's in combination with the Windsor Fellowship. So I'm actually doing a speed networking mentoring session with them this week in Birmingham. And then the other one is, this is specific to Loughborough University because I'm an alumnus from there, but they have basically a future talent program where essentially they have mentors from industry who come in and help. But with that, pretty much almost any university will probably have a very similar sort of program. So yeah, look into that.
Brilliant. Well, listen, from myself, thank you. From the Race and STEM community as well, thank you. We know that this message and this conversation will hit a number of people, I'm sure, in a way in which they can be encouraged, and it's not easy, but little by little we will get there, I'm sure of it. And thank you, all the best, continued success, and we'll catch up on the other side. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak.
No problem. Have a good day.